Hi, I'm John Henry Adams, and I'm a special collections librarian here at the University of Missouri. I'm here to talk to you for a little bit about different parts of the book that you may encounter out in the wild.
When you look at a closed book, the first thing you see are its covers. The technical term for the covers of a hardcover book is the boards. In the Middle Ages and before, the core of a book's covers were typically beech or oak boards, which were used to keep the parchment under pressure so that it wouldn't curl up. Later, after printing, this was no longer necessary, and so eventually we started using different forms of cardboard, first made by bookbinders and later by paper makers. The boards are usually, though not always, covered with another material: parchment, leather, paper, book cloth, or some other material. This is less structural and more a question of aesthetics. The pages between the covers are called the text block. The covers protect the text block from harm. Sometimes you get a book that doesn't have boards, but does have a cover. This is what we call a limp binding. Limp bindings are cheaper to produce, though that doesn't mean that the book inside is necessarily of lower quality. In the Middle Ages and early modern period, limp bindings were usually made of parchment, though later on, thick paper was used. Modern limp bindings are called paperbacks. The spine of a book is the place where the boards or the covers are attached to the text block. Today, the spine is the part of the book that faces out from the shelf, though in the Middle Ages, it was the foredge that faced out. More on that later. The spine may be exposed, but it is usually covered. Sometimes, the spine will also have these ridges on it. The ridges are called raised bands. They're created when the cover material has to be wrapped around the sewing supports. More on them later. Still, watch out! In the 1600s, it became fashionable to put false raised bands on the backs of spines as decoration. Many modern binding techniques don't have visible sewing supports, or sewing supports at all, and so there will be no raised bands. The top and bottom of a book are called the head and tail respectively. Sometimes we get end banding like this, though it's also called head banding or possibly tail banding if it happens only at the head or tail. End banding can either be structural, in which case it will add some strength to the binding and protect the text block, or it can be purely decorative. The outer edge of the text block is called the foredge. Sometimes the foredge of a book will have the title of the book written on it, or it will be decorated. A leaf is a piece of paper with 2 pages on it. A page is just one side of a leaf. In Germany, they still call paper sheets leaves, and pages are called sides. The 2 sides of each leaf have special Latin names, recto and verso. Recto comes from the Latin for direct or straightforward and refers to the page or side that is on the right-hand side when the book is open. For an unfolded sheet of paper, this is the front. Verso comes from the Latin verb to turn, and it is the side of the leaf once it has been turned over. The verso page is sometimes also called the back, though that assumes that you're reading from left to right the way we do in the European tradition. You might say, therefore, that we are looking at leaf B3 recto, and now we're looking at leaf B3 verso. A gathering is made up of one or more sheets of paper that have been folded and bound into the book so that the fold is up against the spine. The two main ways of attaching the gatherings to the rest of the book are with thread, in which case you sew through the paper, or with glue. Sewing is stronger, but more time-intensive and so more expensive. Sometimes the book is sewn onto sewing supports made of cords or leather, and sometimes it isn't. Glue is cheaper, but also doesn't last as long. Some really cheap books don't even bother with gatherings and just glue all the pages in one by one. Books like that don't last long. The part of the text block closest to the spine is called the gutter. If you look very carefully, you can sometimes see the thread used to sew a book together here. At the start and end of the book, especially in hardcovers, you often get fancy paper or even silk for decoration. These leaves are called the end leaves or the end papers. The part of them that is glued to the boards is called the paste down.
And that concludes our video. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.